Thank you very much. I'm Matt Lindsay. I'm the president of Mather Economics. I am an economist and actually started the company about 2002. I was formerly with Arthur Andersen, where I did consulting across a number of businesses, and prior to that actually worked for a few years as an economist at UPS, the transportation company. So I'll tell you more about the firm in a moment.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Christian. I am not an economist. I was a former media executive for about 26 years with companies like Dow Jones, Gannett, Knight Ridder, and McClatchy, and oversaw marketing and audience initiatives for those companies during that time.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kent Shott. I came to Mather about 2 years ago from ESPN, where I oversaw the digital subscription business Insider. Before that, worked for a number of large and small media companies on the digital side, and at Mather, I focus on creating digital solutions for our clients.
Great, so just a real brief word about Mather Economics. We're based in Atlanta, but we have people in a number of places around the U.S., including Kansas City and New York, where Chris and Ken are from. We also have some folks that work in Europe. As I mentioned, we were founded in 2002, and we've basically kind of came into this space to help companies with subscription analytics. And so we really work with companies on how do they do yield management for their subscribers. And so most of our work is around customer analytics and yield management. There's about 30 of us. The vast majority are economists, and it's not as bad as it sounds. We actually, as that was mentioned before, we work with a lot of newspapers. We also work with magazines and other companies that have subscription relationships. And as an economist, subscription pricing is very interesting because you actually have these long-term relationships with customers. And so unlike other industries where you sell somebody something once, in a subscription relationship, obviously you acquire them and then you have these multiple times to change that relationship, either through the pricing side of the equation or the product side. So that's really the nature of our business. So real quick, we'll just talk a little bit about kind of digital revenue optimization. And I'll start with newspapers. What we found with newspapers as they go digital, it's very interesting in that they actually had a very similar problem to the music industry, in that they have this album of content essentially. In many cases, people just read the song or they just want the song. We're not necessarily of the opinion right now, we're not sure that the newspaper business should unbundle their album in a sense, because in many cases there's value in having that relationship where you actually, it's stickier to expose people to a lot of different content. However, we do see, if you look at the customer data, that there actually is, people tend to read one or two things on a recurring basis. The key message that we'd like to leave you with today, and these other guys are going to talk about this in other industries as well, is that when you go to digital, one of the things we find is that it's important to maintain that direct relationship with the consumer. We find that in many cases newspapers or publishers are giving up that direct financial relationship, and there's a lot of problems inherent with that. Apple's a good example. You can buy a subscription to a lot of newspapers or a lot of publications through Apple, but Apple retains that customer relationship and the newspaper loses it. And so that's obviously a problem. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in some other industries, but that's one thing we'll come back to.
On the magazine side, what we see is, and we work with quite a few magazines. We have about 150 titles that we work with, including the largest U.S. magazine company, Meredith, is a client of ours. What we see there is that I guess the model hasn't really evolved or changed. It's still very much like what the traditional magazine model has been for years, and that's been that it's still very much a rate-based focused business. So they spend enormous amounts of time and energy and money on acquiring that rate base and continuing to try to monetize that almost exclusively through the advertising side. And where we see that needs to evolve is that they need to do a much better job of relying on the audience to become a much more significant portion of their revenue picture and model as they move forward.
So finally, we've evolved from newspapers to magazines. We've seen the change into digital, and unfortunately, at some point, somebody made the decision that this content should be free and we should support it through ads, and that became the standard, as we all know, and it's become a very difficult thing to put back into the box. Especially now as things are continually changing on the digital side with programmatic, with a lot of advertising, numbers falling to the floor with the move to digital. You have a situation where for good content, for for quality content to continue going forward and being produced, you need to find a way to support it with revenue. And we feel very strongly that necessitates that direct-to-consumer revenue relationship. Because today, you have brands that are trying to put the genie back in the bottle, at least partially. Obviously, the New York Times had a lot of success. You have brands like Slate who've started subscription businesses, People, Washington Post, CNBC recently started a CNBC Pro digital subscription business, because there's a recognition that direct-to-consumer revenue is something you need to maintain your high-quality standards, to maintain your newsrooms. You need that second revenue source that's not dependent on a Facebook feed, on social media, on buying marketing campaigns. And it offers a lot more predictability for any kind of business. Because I'm a strong believer that in the future, the revenue model needs to have this direct-to-consumer piece to it to succeed. And you see the major brands digitally are all focused on that. And you have your Netflix, you have your Xbox, MLB.com. ESPN is even breaking away from just traditional print or traditional insider subscription business and starting to sell things like the Cricket World Cup online. Amazon Prime is a great example of a subscription business that is continually growing and is becoming more and more important part of their business. So you can really sustain your digital growth. You control it. You can control what you invest in, and you can really chart your own path if you have this dual subscription or dual revenue source.
It's important to have that dual revenue source because as you look at things in terms of how you want to promote and market your products, regardless if they're digital or if they're traditional print, as you make those investments, the traditional way I guess we've done that is we've stepped back and said, should we enhance the product more or should we invest more in marketing? When we do product development and marketing related efforts, those are typically very time consuming. They're also very expensive. They're long play, kinds of initiatives. And those initiatives now, as you rub those up against some of the disruptors that are out there, whether it's meters and paywalls and those kinds of things that become even a little more complex in terms of how you execute them.
So data, as a lot of people, we go to conferences now and everybody talks about data. The key thing about data is that data in and of itself isn't really valuable. It's what you do with the data. And a lot of times data is overwhelming. There's so much of it. How do you actually monetize or use it to run your business? And that's where we have worked with a lot of clients to try to do that. We find that at the end of the day, it's always going to come down to your revenue streams. It's going to be your audience or it's going to be your advertising. And so things that you can do to enhance your ability to make those decisions, tactical decisions using data is really where you should invest your time and energy. In fact, we often advise our clients to start with the end in mind when you begin a big data project, to actually say, what are we going to do with this data so that we can make sure you get the right data in your organization, because trying to capture it all is very expensive and time consuming. But just to give you a sense, I mean, the business that we see evolving is, and I think this is public information, but the New York Times, is there anybody here from the New York Times? Yeah. I mean, we love the New York Times. They've made huge investments in data, and what we find is that, I don't know if it's by design, but your model, you are actually being very successful in audience revenue. In fact, I think your audience revenue exceeds your advertising revenue. And if you look at other leading publishers like The Economist and the Financial Times, that's a similar model. So as much noise gets generated in advertising technology, I think at the end of the day, it's really going to be those publishers that are effective in maintaining that business to consumer relationship and monetizing it are going to be the ones that are survivors and ultimately succeed.
And just to kind of step a little further on that, the great thing about digital is that it's all revealed behavior through data analysis. You know exactly what folks are doing. Unlike the print business or the magazine business where you go to a focus group and you say, well, what do you read? And people say, well, I read the opinion page and then, perhaps some local news. And in fact, they're reading the comics and throwing the rest of the paper out. You know that because you're actually seeing the data captured and you have all that at hand. And that's where you really have the power to make really smart decisions with how you program your site, how you market your site, and how you build products going forward.
Yeah, I think Amy touched on that, our first speaker today, talking about the value of the data behind the cell phone, because to Kent's point, so much of the other information is aspirational in terms of what people say they do. And when you get inside the data, that's when you really understand and know what they truly are as a customer.
So this is a quote that we are big fans of. But essentially, there was a buzz, a very prominent quote that came out that said, "Data is the new oil." And I think that is very compelling. It absolutely is true, but it really makes sense if you really have to have the means to collect the data, the way to move that down, to analyze it and to make the right decisions. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. Data by itself is not necessarily the asset. It's actually all of the things that go into utilizing it.
So, what we do as a company on the digital side specifically is try to use data to focus on the 4 Ps that we've kind of picked out as important for digital companies to create more revenue: programming, product, pricing, and promotion. And so programming is I have a journalism background. I used to be a reporter. I moved to the dark side here on the business side, and I know that there's a lot of angst from certain areas of newsrooms about using data to program sites. I feel strongly, and I feel like progressive organizations going forward will be smarter about how they program if they are able to capture data, use it, and figure out what the audience is consuming, both from a traffic perspective and a value perspective. So what we've done for a couple of clients is try to take their data and merge it into a usable, we call content matrix, where they can know exactly when folks are coming to different sections by time of day, hour of day, and then match that up with how your ad sales side is selling those different sections, both from a local and national point of view, and really slice the apple in a lot of different ways to give programming folks the power to know how the business is doing based on their decisions. And this is valuable. So if you're a digital editor and you're trying to convince traditional newsroom folks, the deadline might be 5 for the paper, but the traffic is out the door by 5. So think about if you want your content read, this is when the traffic is coming in, get it by this time. And then for ad sales folks, this is very valuable as well, because they can see the patterns of the audience, and when they go to sell, they can say, we see a premium of traffic on Monday mornings after football games coming in from 9 until noon. We're going to charge 20% more for this period. So there's a lot that can be done using data to make better programming decisions, and it really can affect the business. The second area in which we really try to use data to help make better decisions, make more revenue for digital companies is product. Matt talked a little bit about the newspaper bundle and how we're not sure exactly what the best path going forward for newsroom organizations is. But I've seen a lot of evidence that the way digital users, truly engaged digital users, not the folks that are coming in from Facebook and you see once a year, the folks that are coming 5 times a month, they're showing a lot of patterns from most publications towards engaging in certain types of content, especially a newspaper organization. So you have your folks that come in and they come in 5 times a month, they only go to sports, and that's 75% of them are only going to sports, those sports anchored folks. You have a group of news folks that only come in and consume news, entertainment, business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity going forward to look at data and make smart decisions about the products you build based on how you can value these customers. Can you sell them ads? Are these sections selling out? Is it local inventory or national inventory? How much money are you making on the ad side? And B, what kind of products can we create? What is the potential audience of folks that is coming over and over again, that is truly engaged and will pay you for that content? So we're working with a lot of different clients. I think that every media organization has its niche. It's one thing that it does better than everybody else, and I think there's a true opportunity there to create products around that.
So on the pricing side, what we find is that publishers have an opportunity to follow in the steps of other industries that have had this disruptive events such as deregulation or new technology innovations in adding a level of sophistication around pricing. And so, we're all accustomed to paying different prices for airline seats and hotel rooms. What Macroeconomics brought to the world, for better or for worse, was that we actually help publishers do the same type of pricing segmentation. And about 10 years ago, I realized that publishers had all of this data about their customers, and what we found is that when they would have a price increase, it was very easy to predict who were the people that were most likely to stop. It were going to be the newer customers, the younger customers, the ones that were less affluent, but the ones that were getting the paper fewer times per week. And what we basically did with publishers is we said, you know what, rather than give the same price increase to everybody, let's give the people that are more sensitive to price a lower increase or no increase at all, and let's give the people that are the other end of the spectrum, those that are long-term, very wealthy, older, more mature, as we call it, people that are getting the paper 7 days a week, they're actually getting a different value out of that product. Let's charge them a little bit more, and we do A/B testing, and we can show that this type of pricing actually generates a considerable amount of profit for organizations. And this is on the digital side. There's even another total dimension to this that's impossible on the print side, is we can actually see how people are engaging with the product. So are they coming 5 days a week? Are they coming once a month, or once in the only time we ever see them? And all of that allows you to make these very tactical pricing decisions, and even not just pricing, but even product promotion and sales attempts and those types of things.
To that point on the promotion side, again, data is important, increasingly important in terms of how we promote, especially in the digital world. To Amy's point earlier, if we only have 3 seconds and we need to try to promote or market a message, promote or market content, try to get an offer, whatever the case, that we're trying to get in front of that person to create action, then in those 3 seconds, it's super important for us to be able to find when's the right time to deliver that message, what's the appropriate message to deliver and tagline for that, and how best should we deliver that message. So doing that in a very precise, customized way that's personal, not these old marketing messages that we did that were kind of one size fits all that we put out there. Our customers are more sophisticated than that. Kent showed that they are very, in many cases, are very specific about the exact type of content that they want to come and interact with us. They're pretty consistent in many cases about which device they're coming to. So if we know those types of things, then we need to be able to deliver a message that's appropriate to that particular customer, so that we have a significant difference in terms of our opportunity to be able to connect with them and get them to act. And with everything we do in that regard, A/B testing is key.
So just to sum things up, every company out here, everybody who works for a media company, you're bursting with customer data, whether you know how to use it, whether you can access it, whether the guy that set it up left 5 years ago and you have no idea where it's going. It is all there, and we've worked with a lot of clients to find that. And once you find it, you can really use it to monetize, and whether that's through your how you program your site, how you use products or create different products for different types of audience based on that user behavior, how you price those products, and then how you promote them specifically with target messaging. There's a lot of potential there for using that data. It's a hidden gem within all of your companies. And with that in mind, we're big believers that the future is bright for content producers. Quality content will always have value, especially if you can figure out the best way to market it, productize it, program it, and price it. So, thank you.
Lots to think about there. Questions? Okay.
So e-commerce by media organizations. I know you said you work for Meredith, and if you go to betterhomesandgardens.com, there's Shott, BH&G, where they've aggregated a bunch of products, many from what used to be display advertisers or still are display advertisers. Of course, the New York Times has their own e-commerce offerings, framed photos and things like that. Do you see an opportunity for media organizations to have a shopping relationship with their readers in terms of curated items they can buy?
I think that's a great question. We have a partner that works with us that actually provides geo-targeted ads to smartphones, and essentially what newspapers provide is a nexus of commerce. They've always done that. They've really always brought readers and advertisers together to facilitate transactions. And what I think the opportunities they have is to actually be the thing that actually is the platform that enables the transaction. And there are technology companies out there that will white label these types of products or services. And what you can do is actually have a relationship where somebody it could be a push or a pull. In other words, the person can text you which says, give me the lunch specials for things around me, and that publisher can say, okay, well, we have relationships with all these local restaurants. Here are all the coupons that you can get, and so if you want one of those, you say, I want this thing loaded onto my card. When you purchase that lunch on that card, you actually get the deal that was offered, and the newspaper gets a cut of that transaction. And so I think those types of revenue models are actually possible now and will become more available.
And you look at, on the magazine side, you have a book like Domino, which went out of business and came back, and now is basically facilitates that kind of commerce. From the user point of view, especially, I won't use the M word, millennial, but the younger folks, there's definitely less of a conflict. They want to get from point A to point B. They're not worried about whether the Domino newsroom is ethically all right with, should they be selling that, or is there a relationship there? So I think that depending on your organization, there are going to be others around you that come up on the side and do these things. So you have to figure out a way to be smart about how you integrate these kind of things ethically into your newsroom, keeping your standards, but also recognizing the potential opportunity for revenue.
And I'll just touch on one thing from the commerce side, particularly for newspapers, the trusted brand aspect, coupled with the fact that you have the payment mechanism in place from a billing standpoint with a significant percentage of the customers. So in many of the newspaper partners we work with, they have as much as 50%, some even higher, of their customers that are on auto-renewing credit card. So if you can white label one of these types of services, become that bridge for commerce between your advertiser and your consumer, the fact that you have that payment piece already there in place, it's really a ripe opportunity, we think, in terms of the ability to create new revenue streams.
Oh, hi. Thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting. I was wondering if you, in terms of what you're seeing, a lot of the companies that you're showing up there are really big media companies that already have audience of much higher than a lot of us do. Do you see different tactics that smaller organizations can do to break through, even to get an audience? I mean, in terms of subscriptions and views. I mean, what are these are people who kind of have people that are trying to capture them in different ways. What about if you're starting from ground zero? What are the ways in which you can even reach people to know that you exist and how they can engage with you?
Well, I think, we work with we don't work just with gigantic companies. So I have a couple clients that are very small, trying to figure out how to, that know they have this value, they have a subscription value type product, and that they're not making money on the ad side in the kind of way, that makes it worthwhile. So, it's always, you always have to walk before you can run. To get a base of subscription traffic, you have to get folks in the door. So, I'm definitely not an advocate of coming out and saying we're going to have a pay site from the scratch, no free content, trust us. You have to give folks the opportunity to sample your product. You have to, maybe go out for a year or two, try to build your audience through traditional audience building activities, and so that you create some kind of stable, engaged audience before you step into the subscription business. I don't think you can just walk right out the door with the subscription product unless you have that base of audience to start.
Hi, my name is Ruben Stern. I'm the Deputy Director of our Futures Lab here at RJI. I wonder if you could talk a bit about this. So public media is based on the idea that we provide value to you, you decide how valuable that is, you give us money every year, we do that once a year, we get out of the way. And I wonder if you could talk about that affinity business model as opposed to the product business model that you guys were talking about with subscriptions.
I think that's a really interesting place for data use. I think, I've talked to a couple of public media companies, and at least the ones I've talked to, there's not a lot of relationship between the business side and the on-air side. But I think there is an opportunity there to help create more content for folks who do donate. So what do you know about your donating audience? How can you how can you track them better on what they do with your products? Are they using your website every day? If so, what content are they using? You can create more value for the folks that are your highest value customers, and in that way, in theory, generate more revenue at the end of the year if they're using the product more, if you're engaging them more. I think there's a great opportunity there for using data to kind of marry those two sides, the donating, the business side, folks taking in the money, and the audience side, what are those folks doing online?
I'm Matt Renzo. I'm a former digital first media guy. We use Mather in several markets. So Ken Doctor recently wrote a piece about single copy newspaper decline and how he thought that was kind of a self-inflicted wound. I wonder if we're headed that way with some companies on home delivery, and if you see warnings on that, customers getting 50% increases in a year, and that turning people off not only to the print edition but to the brand in general.
Yeah, that's a great question. As many of you may be aware, I mean, what's happened in the past 5 years, in particular with the newspaper industry, is that as the advertising revenue has declined, I mean, it's 50% of what it was a few years ago. It's gone from basically 60 billion a year to 50 billion a year, or 30 billion a year. Is that they've had to, the revenue, historical revenue mix has been 80% advertising, 20% consumer revenue, and that was just no longer sustainable. That they had to make up that revenue somewhere else. And so we have worked with Digital First Media and a number of companies to implement very substantial price increases. And what we've really done is we've changed the nature of the relationship. We've offered all access, so they get digital products as part of their subscription. We've given them loyalty programs. We've helped them implement other types of specialized products and services. So I do think we've reached a point where we've gone from one equilibrium to another, in the sense that I think what happened is we've gone through a 5-year transition, and what also publishers have realized is there was a lot of unprofitable customers out there, that they were, subscriptions were subsidized enormously by advertising revenue. And when that subsidization went away, they had to basically have a very rational look at their consumer relationships, and they said, where are we making money? And there was a vast number of customers they were losing money on. In Denver is a great example, which is kind of one of your bigger papers. They were delivering, statewide the Denver Post, and you have to get papers across the mountains, and it was very, very expensive. And so there's been a lot of rationalization of circulation, and that's happened. But to your point, we do a lot of A/B testing where we take a statistical valid sample and we do not give them a price increase, and we give a price increase to the rest of the company or customers, and we observe the relationship there. And what we can do in that case is be very cognizant of, on the margin, are we pushing that too far? And it's different for different publishers, but it's something we absolutely have to pay close attention to.
I think one of the other things that we see that's a differentiator, and that'll be even more important going forward, is the companies we see that do better in terms of leveraging price across that consumer base are the ones that aren't pulling down the product and continuing to shrink and pull and take away, but they're doing things to invest in the product while they grow this consumer revenue substantially. So when the customer feels like there's some value proposition there that goes with the pricing action, there's a significant difference in terms of what the observed behavior and the reaction is within a market. So I think that as we as media organizations have pushed the consumer side of the envelope more to be more aggressive there, I think that's absolutely the right choice that all of our organizations needed to make. But I think we have to be strategic about doing that going forward to look at how we innovate and create better products so that we have the ability, to work on pricing with our customers.
I want to ask a quick question about sort of taking this out of the sort of macro view and more into the micro view, workflow mindset. Organizations that maybe engage in social listening heavily on the front end, and how much of that you're seeing, and whether or not you're seeing that their engagement, even in sort of micro bursts, is going up, and what that might do to long-term sorts of loyalty and engagement patterns.
I mean, I think it depends on the organization. The main issue, I think, with some of the social activity for larger organizations is if you're a newspaper in Kansas City or St. Louis or whatever, your ad sales really depends on getting that local. You're generating most of your revenue through local ad sales. Folks coming in from out of market, you're not really monetizing. You're getting $1.50, 60 cents. So the more you push things out, if you're pushing them out nationally from a social point of view, you're not able to monetize that traffic as much. So I think organizations need to be mindful of kind of figuring out how they can engage locally, socially, versus just engaging socially, throwing it out to as wide a breadth as possible, because they have to think about how they're monetizing that traffic. Because if you're getting 20% of your traffic is coming from local and 80% is coming from out of market, pushing that out is not as valuable as it might seem to be.
Is there value, however, in maybe layering that and saying some of the stuff we're going to put here, and we're going to try to build some sort of tapestried, sort of layered content strategy that says that people can predict that we're going to put this out here, but that's going to lead them to here, and then here, and then here?
If you're actually very good at executing on that and hooking people once they get into the page, that can be an effective tactic. I haven't seen that many organizations that are really good at pulling one visit in from a social network and then getting people to actually engage in other content. You have such a large percentage of those folks that leave immediately. I'd love to see more examples of people who are very good at engaging other clicks through their traffic, through those pages.
Okay, very good. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.